For 7 years, she had buried her true nature so deep that even she sometimes forgot the ancient power flowing through her veins. Until the night the Alpha King walked into her bookshop, looked directly into her eyes, and whispered the name no living soul should have known. Lysandra, Night Whisper, last daughter of the lunar prophecy. In that moment, as mortal customers browsed poetry collections mere feet away, she realized her carefully constructed human life was about to shatter, and the destiny she'd fled across realms to escape had finally found her in the most ordinary of places. Between the dusty shelves of classic literature and the gentle chime of the shop's brass bell. The morning had started like any other in the coastal town of Saltmere. Iris, the name she'd chosen for herself, unlocked the doors of the Forgotten Page, her small bookshop nestled between a bakery and an antique store. The familiar scent of old paper and vanilla candles greeted her, a comfort she'd grown to love over the years. No one in this sleepy mortal town suspected that their quiet bookseller was anything more than a young woman with peculiar silver eyes and an uncanny to recommend exactly the right book for each customer. She had perfected the art of being invisibly visible, present enough to run her business and exchange pleasantries with the locals, but never so memorable that anyone would dig too deep into her past. When asked about her family, she'd mention vague relatives from up north. When invited to social gatherings during the full moon, she'd politely decline, citing inventory nights at the shop. The mortals of Saltmere had accepted her as one of their own, never noticing how she flinched at the sound of wolves howling in the distant mountains, or how her hands trembled whenever someone mentioned the ancient legends of the Crimson Moon Pack that once ruled these lands centuries ago. But Iris, Lysandra, had reasons for her deception that went beyond mere survival. She was the last of the Night Whisper bloodline, carriers of the lunar prophecy, a power so rare and dangerous that 3 different supernatural factions had waged war to possess it. Her family had been systematically hunted when she was 15, leaving her as the sole survivor of a massacre that had painted the moon red with Night Whisper blood. The prophecy spoke of a Night Whisper who would either unite all shifter clans under one rule or destroy the veil between the mortal and supernatural worlds entirely. Her parents had died believing she would fulfill the lighter path of that prophecy. Their killers had feared she would bring about the darker one. So she had run, learned to suppress her gifts, and found sanctuary in the mundane rhythms of mortal life. She discovered that wolfsbane tea could dull her heightened senses, that silver jewelry, which should have burned her skin, actually helped mask her supernatural signature when worn long enough to build tolerance. She trained herself to walk at human speed, to pretend exhaustion after reasonable exertion, to eat regular food even though her body craved the raw energy of moonlight. Every full moon, she locked herself in the shop's reinforced basement, which she'd lined with soundproofing material and told curious contractors was for rare book preservation. The Forgotten Page became both her refuge and her prison. She filled it with stories of adventure and romance, living vicariously through the tales she sold to others. Her favorite section was mythology, where she could hide truth among fiction, keeping ancient texts about her kind in plain sight, knowing mortals would never believe them real. She'd even made a small life for herself here, forming tentative friendships with Mrs. Chen from the bakery next door, who brought her fresh pastries every Monday, and young Tommy Morrison, who helped her with deliveries in exchange for adventure novels. This carefully maintained existence had lasted 7 peaceful years. 7 years of believing she'd successfully disappeared from the supernatural world's radar. 7 years of convincing herself that Lysandra Nightwhisper had died with her family and only Iris, the bookseller, remained. But deep down, beneath the layers of suppression and self-denial, she knew this peace was borrowed time. The prophecy didn't care what name she used or how many herbs she consumed to dull her nature. And somewhere, in the shadows between worlds, ancient eyes were still searching for the last daughter of the moon. The brass bell above her shop door chimed at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday that had been, until that moment, remarkably ordinary. Iris was balanced on her worn wooden ladder, shelving a new shipment of Victorian poetry, when the atmosphere in her bookshop shifted. It wasn't the usual change that came with customers entering. This was something that made every instinct she'd spent years suppressing suddenly roar to life. The temperature seemed to drop and rise simultaneously, and the very air became dense with a power that made her human facade feel like tissue paper against a hurricane. She forced herself to continue shelving, keeping her breathing steady despite the ancient recognition flooding through her veins. 3 sets of footsteps entered her shop, but one in particular made the night whisper blood in her body sing a song of both terror and something else. Something she refused to name. Without turning around, she knew exactly who had found her. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Ravek Stormclaw, had entered her sanctuary. "Can I help you find something?" she asked in her practiced mortal voice, carefully climbing down the ladder with deliberately human movements. When she finally turned, her carefully maintained composure nearly shattered. Ravek stood in the center of her shop like a dark sun, drawing everything into his orbit. He was taller than she'd imagined from the whispered stories, perhaps 6.5 feet, with jet black hair that held hints of silver despite his seemingly young appearance. His eyes were the color of winter storms, gray with flecks of electric blue, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to either run or bare her throat in submission. Flanking him were 2 others she recognized from supernatural gossip that had reached her even in exile. Malik, his beta, a bronze-skinned warrior whose scarred hands had ended more rebellions than anyone could count, and Ivana, the pack's lead tracker, whose reputation for finding the unfindable was legendary. But it was Ravek who commanded the space, his presence making her small bookshop feel like it might burst at the seams. "We're looking for a specific text," Ravek said, his voice like distant thunder, smooth and threatening all at once. "Something about local histories? Perhaps you could assist us personally?" The way he emphasized personally made it clear this wasn't a request. Other customers in the shop seemed to unconsciously drift toward the exit, sudden remembrances of urgent appointments pulling them away. Within minutes, only the 4 of them remained. Iris forced herself to maintain eye contact, though every submissive instinct screamed at her to look away from an alpha's direct gaze. "Of course. The local history section is just past the fiction shelves. What particular period interests you?" She moved toward the indicated section, hyper-aware of how Ravek followed, not behind her, but beside her, matching her pace perfectly. His proximity made her skin prickle with awareness, her wolf, buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed, stirring restlessly. "I'm interested in legends," he said, running his fingers along the book spines as they walked. Specifically, stories about bloodlines that were thought to be extinct. Amazing how sometimes what we believe is dead is merely sleeping. His fingers stopped on a particular volume, one of her hidden texts about the Night Whisper clan that she'd disguised as local folklore. This one, for instance, tells an interesting tale about moon-blessed wolves who could walk between worlds. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. That's just folklore. The tourists enjoy those kinds of stories. She reached for the book, but he pulled it back, opening it to a page she knew by heart. A page containing her family's genealogy disguised as mythology. His finger traced down the family tree, stopping at the bottom where she'd carefully torn away the section that would have shown her name. Curious, he murmured, his storm-gray eyes lifting to meet hers again. The page is torn just where the story would become current. He closed the book with deliberate slowness. Tell me, miss, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name? Iris, she said, proud that her voice didn't waver. Iris Blackwood. Iris, he repeated, and something about the way he said it made it sound like he was tasting a lie. Pretty name. Garden variety, you might say. Malik snorted softly from where he stood, guard by the door, while Ivana had disappeared into the stacks, though Iris could feel her circling like a shark. Tell me, Iris, do you enjoy the full moon? It's particularly beautiful from Saltmere, I'm told. The question was a trap wrapped in casual conversation. I usually work inventory those nights. The shop keeps me too busy to pay attention to celestial events. She moved to step around him, but he shifted subtly, not quite blocking her, but making retreat impossible without obvious flight. This close, she could smell his scent. Pine forests and winter storms, power and danger. It made something primal in her want to respond, to let her true nature surface just for a moment. Ravek circled her slowly, like a predator studying prey, though something in his eyes suggested he saw her as anything but weak. Inventory, he mused, picking up random books and setting them down without looking at them. Must be exhausting work, requiring such isolation. Tell me, Miss Blackwood, have you heard the news from the supernatural territories? No, I suppose you wouldn't, being human and all. The way he said human was almost mocking, a challenge she refused to rise to. I hear rumors, she said carefully, straightening books he'd disturbed. Travelers pass through Saltmere occasionally. They say the Northern Pack has been expanding its influence. Some say the Alpha King is searching for something. She met his gaze steadily. Or someone. His smile was sharp as winter moonlight. Someone, yes. You see, 3 months ago, our pack's oracle had a vision. The same oracle who hadn't spoken a prophecy in 50 years suddenly woke screaming about silver eyes and forgotten bloodlines. She spoke of a power sleeping among the unaware, a key to either salvation or destruction. He moved closer, and she fought not to step back. The oracle said this person would be found where stories sleep and the moon's pull is ignored. Poetic, isn't it? Ivana emerged from the stacks, holding 3 more books, all of them texts Iris had carefully hidden among normal volumes, each containing fragments of Night Whisper history. Interesting collection for a mortal bookshop, the tracker said, her amber eyes knowing. These are authentic, Alpha, written in the old script. No human should even be able to read them, much less know to collect them. The game was unraveling, but Iris held her ground. I bought those at an estate sale. The seller said they were replicas, historical curiosities. I thought they'd add atmosphere to the shop. She shrugged. The perfect picture of human ignorance. Are you telling me they're genuine? What language is that supposed to be? Rivik studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed. It wasn't cruel or mocking, but genuinely amused. You're very good, he said. 7 years of perfect performance, not a single slip. Even now, with 3 dominant wolves in your space, you haven't let your true nature surface once. That takes remarkable control, or remarkable fear. I don't know what you're talking about. But even as she said it, she felt the walls closing in. Malik had positioned himself by the back exit. Ivana stood near the windows. And Rivik stood between her and the front door, between her and freedom. No? Then you won't mind if I tell you why I'm really here, Rivik said, his voice dropping to something more intimate, more dangerous. The Northern Pack isn't just expanding, we're preparing for war. The Southern Alliance has been mobilizing, the Eastern Covens are restless, and something dark stirs in the Western wastes. Every supernatural faction is preparing for a conflict that could tear apart both worlds. And according to our oracle, there's only one thing that could prevent it, or ensure everyone's destruction. He pulled out an ancient scroll from his coat, one that made every drop of Night Whisper blood in her body recognize its authenticity. The lunar prophecy, he said simply, which states that when the 3 moons align, an event happening in exactly 60 days, a Night Whisper will either unite the fractured supernatural world or destroy the veil between realms entirely. The prophecy every faction has been seeking. The power everyone believes died with with the Night Whisper clan 7 years ago. Then you're chasing ghosts, Iris said, but her voice cracked slightly. Everyone knows that bloodline is extinct. Everyone knows what they were meant to know, Rivik corrected. A 15-year-old girl's body was never found. The massacre site showed signs of someone escaping through a portal, blood trails that ended at a dimensional tear. And curiously, within a month of that tragedy, a young woman with distinctive silver eyes appeared in Saltmere, with enough money to buy a bookshop, but no traceable history before that date. The truth hung between them like a blade. Iris felt her carefully constructed world crumbling, but she made one last attempt at denial. Coincidence. Silver eyes aren't that rare, and I have documents. Forged, Ivana interrupted. Expertly done, but forged nonetheless. We checked. Your birth certificate, your school records, even your library card, all created 7 years ago by someone with extensive knowledge of human bureaucracy, but who made one tiny mistake. She held up a photocopy of one of Iris's documents. You dated one of them using the lunar calendar before correcting it? No human would make that error. Rivik stepped forward, and this time Iris did step back, her spine hitting the bookshelf behind her. He leaned in, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. His presence was overwhelming, not just physically, but supernaturally. She could feel his alpha power pressing against her shields, testing them like a musician testing piano keys. Here's what's going to happen, Rivik said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're going to stop this charade. You're going to come with us willingly, and you're going to help prevent a war that could destroy everything, mortal and supernatural alike." His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, something flickered there. Not just the cold calculation of an Alpha King, but something warmer, more personal. "Or would you prefer I announce your identity here and now? How long do you think you'd last once every faction knows Lysandra Night Whisper is alive and hiding in a mortal bookshop?" The sound of her true name on his lips sent a shock through her system that had nothing to do with fear. It was recognition, bone deep and undeniable. But more than that, when he said her name, she felt something snap into place, a connection she'd only heard about in the oldest stories. The mate bond, the rarest of supernatural connections, happening perhaps once in a generation. And from the way his eyes widened slightly, he'd felt it too. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible. You can't be—" She tried to pull back, but there was nowhere to go. The bond hummed between them, new and fragile, but undeniably real. It was like suddenly becoming aware of a thread that had always existed, connecting her heart to his. Every instinct she had screamed at her to accept it, to lean into the connection that promised safety, belonging, completion. But her rational mind rebelled. This was the Alpha King, the most dangerous wolf in the territories. Being his mate would put her at the center of everything she'd run from. Malik and Ivana had gone very still, sensing the shift in energy but not understanding its source. Ravek's expression had become unreadable, his storm-gray eyes intense as he processed what had just happened. "Well," he said softly, "this complicates things." "I won't go with you," Iris managed, though the bond made even that small defiance feel like tearing fabric. "I won't be used as anyone's weapon." "Not by you, not by anyone." She could feel her control slipping, her wolf, suppressed for so long, clawing at its cage, desperate to answer its mate's call. 7 years of wolfsbane tea and silver jewelry hadn't prepared her for this. "You don't have a choice," Ravek said, but his voice had lost its edge. The bond affected him too. She could feel it through their new connection, his surprise, his own resistance to the unexpected development. The prophecy says a Night Whisper will make a choice," she interrupted, finding strength in desperation. "Not that a Night Whisper will be forced. If you drag me away from here, if you try to control me, you might trigger the very destruction you're trying to prevent." It was a gamble, but she saw it land. Ravek pulled back slightly, considering. "Alpha," Malik said from his position by the door. "We have company." 3 vehicles approaching, Southern Alliance signatures. His hand went to his weapon. "They must have tracked us here." Ivana cursed softly. "They'll sense her if they get close enough. The bond's activation will have sent out an energy pulse. Every supernatural within 50 miles just felt something significant happen." Ravek's jaw clenched. The smart move would be to grab her and run, to secure the Night Whisper before their enemies could. But the bond made that impossible. Forcing one's mate was taboo beyond measure, something that could break an alpha's power entirely. He was trapped between his duty as Alpha King and the ancient laws that governed mated pairs. "You have about 30 seconds to decide," he told her, his voice urgent but not threatening. "Come with us willingly, and I promise you'll be protected, not controlled. Stay here, and the Southern Alliance will take you, and they won't care about bonds or choices. They'll drain your power and leave you an empty shell. Through their connection, she could feel he was telling the truth. More than that, she could feel his genuine desire to protect her, not just as the Night Whisperer, but as his mate. The sound of vehicles pulling up outside made the decision for her. Car doors slammed. Footsteps approached. Many footsteps. "Back door?" she said quickly, grabbing only her mother's hidden journal from behind the counter. "There's a tunnel in the basement. It leads to the old smuggler's caves on the beach." She looked at Ravek, and for the first time, let him see past her human mask to the frightened but determined wolf beneath. "I'm not agreeing to anything beyond survival right now." "Understood," he said, and she felt his relief through the bond. "Malik, Ivana, defensive positions but don't engage unless necessary. We're leaving." He turned to Iris. "Lead the way, Lysandra." Hearing her true name again, especially now with the bond humming between them, made her shiver. But there was no time to process the magnitude of what had happened. As she led them through her shop toward the basement, she couldn't help but wonder if she was running from one prison into another. The mate bond pulled at her, promising safety in Ravek's presence. But she'd learned long ago that safety was often an illusion. Still, as the front door of her shop exploded inward and Southern Alliance wolves poured in, she realized that her 7 years of hiding were over. Lysandra Night Whisperer was back in the game, whether she wanted to be or not. The smuggler's tunnel was narrow and damp, carved from limestone centuries ago by humans who'd used these caves to avoid taxation. Now it served as an escape route for the last Night Whisperer and the Alpha King she was inexplicably bonded to. As they moved through the darkness, Ravek's hand occasionally brushed hers, each contact sending sparks through the nascent bond. Behind them, they could hear the Southern Alliance tearing through her shop, destroying 7 years of carefully built peace. "The caves open onto Crescent Beach," Lysandra said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. She'd dropped all pretense of being human now. Her movements were fluid, predatory, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "There's a boat hidden there. I always kept an escape route ready." "Paranoid," Ivana observed, though her tone held approval. "Survivor?" Lysandra corrected. When you've watched your entire bloodline get systematically slaughtered, paranoia becomes wisdom. The words came out harder than she intended, and she felt Ravek's curiosity spike through their bond. He wanted to know what had really happened that night, but now wasn't the time for that particular horror story. They emerged onto the moonlit beach, the sound of waves covering their movements. Lysandra's hidden boat was exactly where she'd left it, concealed beneath driftwood and old nets. As Malik and Ivana prepared the vessel, Ravek turned to her. "The Southern Alliance won't give up. They'll track us." "Let me worry about that," she said, pulling out a small vial from her jacket. The liquid inside seemed to shimmer with its own light. "Night Whisperer blood has unique properties. A few drops in the water will mask our trail for hours." She cut her palm without hesitation, letting silver-tinged blood drip into the ocean. The waves seemed to sigh as they accepted the offering, and a misty fog began rising from the water. "That's impossible," Ivana breathed. "Blood magic at that level. It would take years of training. Or instinct born from desperation? Lysandra said quietly. She could feel Ravek's questions through the bond, his growing realization that she was far more than just a survivor hiding among humans. Where are we going? North, Ravek said. My stronghold at Iron Peak. It's the only place secure enough to protect you while we figure out our next move. He paused. Unless you have a better suggestion? She laughed bitterly. My suggestions ran out when you walked into my shop and destroyed my cover. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely his fault. The prophecy would have found her eventually. The 3 moons alignment didn't care about her desire for a quiet life. They sailed in tense silence for the first hour, the supernatural fog cloaking them from pursuit. Finally, as the immediate danger passed, Ravek spoke. Tell me about that night. The real story, not the official version. Lysandra stared at the dark water, debating how much to reveal. The bond hummed between them, suggesting trust, but 7 years of solitude had built walls that wouldn't crumble in a single night. What do you know about the Night Whisper clan? That you were peace brokers? Malik said from his position at the helm. Neutral parties who could walk between all supernatural factions without allegiance. Your family mediated disputes for centuries. That's the romantic version, Lysandra said. The truth is, we were weapons pretending to be diplomats. Every Night Whisper could channel pure lunar energy, could walk between worlds, could see through any deception or illusion. We kept peace not through negotiation, but through the threat of what we could do if pushed. She pulled her mother's journal from her bag, running her fingers over its worn cover. My mother tried to change that. She believed we could be true peacemakers, using our gifts for harmony rather than threat. She was the one who proposed the Unity Accords, Ravek said, understanding dawning in his voice. The treaty that would have united all supernatural factions under shared law. And that's what got her killed, Lysandra said flatly. Someone didn't want unity. They wanted chaos, war, division. So they waited until the night of the harvest moon, when our powers were weakest, and they came for us. Her voice grew distant, lost in memory. I was in the library when the attack began. My youngest brother, Marcus, he was only 8, came running to me, blood already soaking his nightshirt. He died in my arms while trying to tell me who had betrayed us. She felt Ravek's rage through the bond, hot and protective. Who was it? He couldn't finish the name. He said, the one who... And then he was gone. Tears she hadn't shed in years threatened to fall. I found my parents in the Great Hall. They'd fought. The room was destroyed, bodies of attackers everywhere. But there were too many. My mother lived just long enough to push her remaining power into me and tell me to run. She said the prophecy had to survive, that I was the bridge between worlds mentioned in the ancient texts. You were 15, Ivana said softly. Just a child. I was a Night Whisper, Lysandra corrected. We stopped being children the moment we could channel moonlight. But yes, I was young. Too young to fight off an organized assault. So I did the only thing I could. I opened a portal to the mortal world and disappeared. I've been running ever since. The boat rocked gently as they navigated up the coast toward Northern Territory. Lysandra had moved to the bow, needing space from Ravek and the increasingly insistent pull of their bond. But distance didn't help. She could feel him watching her. could sense his emotional state as clearly as her own. The unwanted intimacy of it made her skin prickle with equal parts annoyance and something warmer she refused to acknowledge. "You should rest," Ravek said, approaching despite her obvious desire for solitude. "We have another 3 hours before we reach the border." He held out a thick cloak, his cloak, she realized, carrying his scent of pine and winter storms. "You're shivering." "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her body betrayed her. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and stubbornness. 7 years of suppressing her wolf had left her weaker than she should be, and using blood magic after so long had drained her more than she'd expected. "The bond makes lying pointless," he said quietly, draping the cloak around her shoulders despite her protests. "I can feel your exhaustion, your pain, just as I'm sure you can feel that I'm not the monster you're determined to see me as." He was right, and that was the problem. Through their connection, she could sense his true nature. Protective, honorable, burdened by responsibility. He wasn't just an alpha king seeking power. He was a leader trying to prevent a war that could destroy millions of innocent lives. It would be easier if he were cruel or power-hungry. Instead, he was exactly the kind of male her wolf recognized as worthy, and that terrified her more than any threat. "Don't," she warned, as he sat beside her, maintaining careful distance but still too close for her comfort. "Just because we have this connection doesn't mean anything. Bonds can be ignored, suppressed. I've gotten very good at suppressing things." "Have you?" he asked, and there was something almost teasing in his tone. "Is that why your hands are trembling? Why your wolf is so close to the surface I can practically see her in your eyes?" He was right again. Being near him was undoing 7 years of careful control. Her wolf wanted out, wanted to answer the call of its mate. "My wolf is not my master," she said through gritted teeth. "I choose my own path." "I'm not asking you to submit," Ravek said, and the sincerity in his voice made her look at him. "I'm not asking for anything except a chance. Work with me to prevent this war. Help me understand the prophecy. After the 3 moons alignment, after the danger passes, if you want to leave, I won't stop you." "You say that now," she said bitterly. "But mate bonds aren't so easily dismissed. They grow stronger with proximity, with time. Every moment I spend near you makes it harder to think clearly." She could feel the truth of it even now, his presence calming her fear, making her feel safe for the first time in 7 years. "Then we'll maintain distance when possible," he said, though she felt his reluctance through the bond. "I'll assign you separate quarters at Iron Peak. We'll interact only when necessary for planning and preparation." "I can control myself, Lysandra. The question is, can you?" It was a challenge, and her wolf rose to it instinctively. "I've been controlling myself since I was 15. Don't mistake this momentary lapse for weakness." But even as she said it, she found herself unconsciously leaning into his warmth. The cloak smelled like him, and instead of pushing it off as she should, she pulled it tighter. He noticed, of course he did, but didn't comment. Instead, he began to tell her about Iron Peak, about the ancient fortress that had been his family's stronghold for generations. His voice was soothing, and despite her determination to stay alert, she found her eyes growing heavy. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he said softly, and she felt the oath in those words, the binding promise of an alpha to protect. Not the Southern Alliance, not the Eastern Covens, not anyone. You're under my protection now. I don't need protection, she mumbled, but her body had other ideas. Exhaustion finally won, and she found herself slipping into sleep, unconsciously curling toward the warmth and safety Ravek represented. The last thing she felt before darkness claimed her was his hand gently adjusting the cloak to better cover her, and through the bond, a wave of tenderness that made her wolf purr with contentment. When she woke hours later, she was horrified to find herself pressed against his side, her head on his shoulder, his arm carefully positioned to keep her from falling as the boat rocked. Malik and Ivana were studiously looking elsewhere, but she could sense their amusement. She jerked away, her face burning, but the damage was done. Her wolf had chosen, even if her human side still resisted. We're approaching the border, Ravek said calmly, as if he hadn't just spent hours holding her while she slept. You should see this. She looked where he pointed and gasped. The Northern Territory's border was marked by massive walls of ice that seemed to grow from the ocean itself, gleaming in the dawn light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a display of power that reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. Ravek Stormclaw wasn't just an alpha. He was the alpha king of the most powerful pack in the supernatural world. As their boat passed through the ice barriers, Lysandra felt the temperature drop even further. The Northern Territory was a land of eternal winter, where Ravek's pack had thrived for centuries. But something felt wrong. Through the bond, she sensed Ravek's sudden tension, his body going rigid beside her. Malik was already reaching for his weapons. What is it? She asked, but then she saw them, figures standing on the dock that shouldn't be there. 3 wolves she didn't recognize, and one she did. Her blood turned to ice that had nothing to do with the northern climate. Cassius! She breathed, and Ravek's head snapped toward her. You know him? Cassius Vorn. He was my father's apprentice, trained in night whisper techniques for years. He was supposed to be family. Her voice turned hard. He was also conveniently absent the night my family was slaughtered. The male waiting on the dock was handsome, in a sharp, dangerous way, with white blonde hair and eyes like frozen amber. He smiled as their boat approached, and it was the smile of a predator who'd cornered his prey. Lysandra! He called out, his voice carrying across the water. It's been so long. I'd almost given up hope of finding you. How did he get past the borders? Ravek demanded, his power flaring. The air around them grew heavy with alpha dominance. He's a diplomatic envoy, Alpha, one of Ravek's border guards called out nervously. From the Eastern Covens. He arrived yesterday with proper credentials, claiming urgent business regarding the prophecy. Lysandra's mind raced. Cassius, working with the Eastern Covens, meant things were worse than she'd thought. The Covens were practitioners of dark magic, binding supernatural creatures to their will. If they had Cassius, with his knowledge of night whisper abilities. It's a trap, she said urgently. He knows things about my power that no one else does. He studied with my family for 10 years. But it was too late to retreat. As their boat touched the dock, Cassius stepped forward, his smile never wavering. Alpha King Stormclaw, what an honor. And Lysandra, or should I say Iris. I heard about your quaint little bookshop. Such a mundane existence for the last Night Whisper. Your parents would be disappointed. The casual cruelty of his words made her wolf snarl. Beside her, Ravek's growl was audible. "State your business, envoy." "Oh, I think you know why I'm here," Cassius said smoothly. "The Eastern Covens have a proposition regarding the prophecy. We're willing to share certain information about that night 7 years ago. Information I think Lysandra would be very interested to hear." His amber eyes fixed on her. "Wouldn't you like to know who really ordered your family's execution? Who benefited most from the Night Whisper's extinction?" "You did," Lysandra said, stepping onto the dock despite Ravek's protective gesture. "You gained their trust, learned their secrets, and then I was nearly killed trying to save them," Cassius interrupted, pulling down his collar to reveal massive scars across his throat. "I arrived too late, fought the attackers, and barely escaped with my life. I've spent 7 years hunting for you, Lysandra. Not to harm you, but to protect you, to prepare you for what's coming." Through the bond, she felt Ravek's skepticism matching her own. But Cassius continued. "The attack on your family was just the beginning. Someone has been systematically eliminating bloodlines that could influence the prophecy. The Moonstone Pack's healers, dead. The Starfall clan's seers, vanished. The Shadow Ridge prophets, murdered. All in the last 7 years. Someone doesn't want the prophecy fulfilled at all. They want chaos when the 3 moons align." "And you just happen to have figured this out?" Ivana asked, her hand on her blade. "The Eastern Covens have resources," Cassius said. "We've been investigating, preparing. We know the true enemy isn't any single faction. It's someone playing all sides against each other. Someone who was close enough to the Night Whispers to know their weaknesses, powerful enough to organize multiple assassinations, and patient enough to wait 7 years for the prophecy to approach." He looked directly at Lysandra. "Someone who knew you survived and has been watching you all this time." "If that's true," Ravek said, his voice dangerous, "then coming here openly makes you either very brave or very stupid. Or very desperate," Cassius admitted. "The Covens sent me because I'm the only one who knows Lysandra well enough to potentially convince her. The 3 moons align in less than 60 days. Without the Night Whisper power properly prepared and channeled, the veil between worlds won't just weaken, it will shatter entirely. Humans and supernaturals will be thrown together in chaos. Millions will die." He pulled out an ancient tome, one Lysandra recognized as her grandfather's personal grimoire. "This was hidden in the ruins of your family's library. It contains the actual prophecy ritual, not the fragments everyone's been fighting over, but the complete ceremony. The Covens are willing to trade this for an alliance. Your power, guided by this knowledge, channeled through the proper ritual, can save both worlds." "Or destroy them," Lysandra said. "The prophecy has 2 paths." "Yes," Cassius agreed, "which is why you need to know the truth about that night. The one who ordered your family's death, who's been eliminating bloodlines, who wants chaos when the moons align." He paused dramatically. "It's someone in this very territory. Someone close to the Alpha King." The accusation hung in the frozen air. Ravek's power exploded outward, making everyone except Lysandra step back. "Choose your next words very carefully, envoy." But Cassius just smiled that predator's smile. I have proof. Letters, communications, financial records. Someone in your inner circle has been playing a very long game, Alpha King. The question is, do you want to know who? Or would you prefer to walk blindly into their trap with the Night Whisper at your side? The great hall of Iron Peak Fortress was a testament to ancient power. Massive columns of ice that never melted, wolf pelts from legendary hunts, and a throne carved from a single block of obsidian. Ravik had called an emergency gathering of his inner circle, and tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Lysandra stood beside him, still wearing his cloak, the mate bond humming with his barely controlled fury. Cassius stood in the center, surrounded by Ravik's most trusted wolves, Malik, Ivana, and 3 others Lysandra had been introduced to. Thane, the pack's ancient advisor, Sira, the lead healer, and Demon, Ravik's younger brother and military commander. Any one of them could be the traitor Cassius claimed existed. "Present your evidence," Ravik commanded, his voice echoing off the ice walls. "But know that false accusations against my pack carry a death sentence." Cassius pulled out a collection of documents, spreading them on the massive oak table. 7 years ago, someone sent detailed information about the Night Whisper compound's defenses to the attackers. Guard rotations, ward weaknesses, the exact timing of the Harvest Moon ceremony when they'd be most vulnerable. He pointed to a series of letters. These were intercepted by the Eastern Covens from dead drop locations. Same handwriting, same seal. Lysandra moved closer, her heart pounding. She recognized the seal. It was a modified version of the Night Whisper crest, something only someone who'd been welcomed into their inner circle would know how to create. "This is authentic," she said quietly. "This exact variation was only used for correspondence between my family and their closest allies." "Now," Cassius continued, pulling out financial records. Large sums were transferred from Northern Territory accounts to mercenary groups in the weeks before the attack. The transactions were hidden, laundered through multiple fronts, but the Coven's forensic mages traced them back. He looked directly at Ravik. The original authorization came from someone with highest-level pack access. Thane, the elderly advisor, stepped forward. "This proves nothing. Anyone could have forged... Could anyone have forged this?" Cassius interrupted, producing a blood-sealed document. "A contract with the Silver Fang mercenaries, payment for elimination of the Moon-blessed bloodline, sealed in blood magic, and before you claim it's fake, I'm sure your healer can verify its authenticity." Sarah, the healer, reluctantly took the document. Her hands glowed with diagnostic magic as she examined it. Her face paled. It's real. The blood magic is genuine, approximately 7 years old." "Whose blood?" Ravik demanded. Sira's hands trembled. "The blood signature has been masked, but it's definitely from someone of our pack. The magical resonance is unmistakable." The room erupted in accusations and denials. Demon stepped forward, his younger features twisted in anger. "This is ridiculous! We're going to trust an Eastern Coven envoy over our own pack?" "I trust no one," Ravik said coldly, "but I will have the truth." He turned to Lysandra. "You can see through deceptions. It's a Night Whisper gift. Look at my inner circle. Tell me what you see." Lysandra hesitated. She'd been suppressing her abilities for so long, but this moment required them. She let her power surface, her silver eyes blazing with lunar light. The room seemed to shift as she looked at each wolf through her inherited sight, seeing past physical forms to the truth beneath. Malik, loyal, protective, hiding nothing but old battle scars on his soul. Ivana, dedicated, carrying guilt over past failures but no betrayal. Sarah, frightened, confused, innocent. Thane, old secrets, knowledge he'd never shared, but no malice toward her family. And Demon, she gasped. Around Demon, shadows writhed that had nothing to do with normal darkness. The taint of dark magic clung to him, hidden beneath powerful concealment spells that her night whisper sight cut through like paper. But more than that, she saw the moment, a flash of memory leaking through his shields. Demon standing over her youngest brother's body, blood on his hands. "You," she breathed, and everyone followed her gaze to Ravek's brother. "It was you." Demon's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you think you see. I see my brother's blood on your hands." Lysandra snarled, her control shattering. 7 years of suppressed rage erupted as her wolf finally broke free. The transformation was instant and violent, her human form exploding into a massive silver wolf with eyes like moonfire. She lunged at Demon, but Ravek caught her mid-leap, his own alpha strength the only thing keeping her from tearing his brother apart. "Explain yourself," Ravek commanded Demon, still holding the thrashing Lysandra. Through their bond, she felt his horror, his disbelief, his desperate hope that she was wrong. Demon laughed, the sound cold and bitter. "Explain? Explain how I've lived my entire life in your shadow? How every achievement I've ever had was diminished because I wasn't the mighty Ravek?" His own power flared, dark and corrupted. "The Night Whispers were going to cement your power forever with their unity accords. You would have been High Alpha of all territories, and I would have been nothing but your forgotten brother." "So you had them murdered?" Ravek's voice was deadly quiet. "An entire family? Children?" "I was promised power by the Eastern Covens," Demon said, dropping all pretense. "They showed me a different interpretation of the prophecy, one where chaos brings opportunity, where a new order could rise from the ashes. All I had to do was eliminate the peacekeepers and wait for the right moment." He looked at Lysandra, still in wolf form, still fighting against Ravek's hold. "You weren't supposed to survive. But when you did, I convinced the Covens to wait, to let you come to us. And you did, brought by my own brother. Poetic, really." The betrayal hung in the air like poison. Ravek released Lysandra, who immediately shifted back to human form, her body shaking with rage and grief. The mate bond between them was screaming, Ravek's anguish mixing with her own until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "You used me," she said to Ravek, her voice breaking. "You brought me here. To him. Your own brother, the monster who butchered my family." "I didn't know," Ravek said, his own voice raw. "Lysandra, I swear on the moon itself, I didn't know." "Your blood, your pack, your family." She spat. "How can I trust anything about you when your own brother—" She couldn't finish, doubling over as the conflict between the mate bond and her trauma tore at her insides. Her wolf wanted to run to Ravek for comfort, but her human side saw him as tainted by association. Demon laughed again. "Oh, this is perfect. The mate bond makes it even better. You can't kill me without destroying her trust completely, brother. And she can't fully accept you knowing I'm your blood. The prophecy requires unity, but I've created a divide that can't be healed." "Watch me," Ravik said, and before anyone could react, he moved. The Alpha King's power exploded through the room as he grabbed his brother by the throat. "You killed innocents. You betrayed our pack. You murdered children." Each word was punctuated with increasing pressure. "You are no brother of mine." "Ravek, no!" Thane shouted. "Pack law states, I am Pack law!" Ravek roared, his wolf surfacing partially, fangs extending. "He violated everything we stand for, everything our father taught us, everything—" His voice broke. "Everything I thought we both believed in!" But Lysandra stepped forward, placing her hand on Ravek's arm. The touch sent shockwaves through the bond. "Don't," she said quietly. "Not like this. Not for me." Ravek looked at her, confusion clear in his storm-gray eyes. "He killed your family." "Yes," she agreed, tears finally falling. "And killing him won't bring them back. It will only add more blood to an already bloody legacy." She looked at Demon, and the disgust in her eyes made him flinch. "Besides, death is too quick. He should live with what he's done. Strip him of his power, his position, his place in the pack. Let him exist knowing he destroyed everything for nothing." "Merciful little moon child," Demon sneered. "Your parents were just as weak. They could have ruled all supernatural factions with their power, but they wanted peace. Pathetic." This time, it was Cassius who moved. The Eastern Coven envoy's hand shot out, and Demon screamed as dark marks appeared on his skin. "Actually, the Covens have decided you're a liability," Cassius said coldly. "You are useful, but your instability threatens the prophecy. Consider our alliance terminated." The marks spread across Demon's body, a binding curse that would seal away his wolf, leaving him essentially human. It was the cruelest punishment possible for a wolf shifter. Demon collapsed, screaming as his supernatural nature was locked away. "Stop!" Ravek commanded, but Cassius shook his head. "This is Coven justice for betraying a blood contract. He promised us the Night Whisper, alive and compliant. He failed." Cassius looked at Lysandra. "The offer still stands. The grimoire, the ritual knowledge, in exchange for an alliance. The prophecy must be fulfilled correctly, or everyone suffers." Lysandra stood in the center of the great hall, pulled in every direction. The mate bond urged her to seek comfort in Ravek, but how could she accept a mate whose brother had destroyed everything she loved? How could she trust any of them? The Northern Pack had harbored her family's killer. The Eastern Covens had facilitated the massacre. The Southern Alliance would use her as a weapon. There was nowhere safe, no one to trust. "I need air," she said, backing toward the door. I can't. Lysandra." Ravek reached for her, but she flinched away. The rejection hit him physically through the bond, making him stagger. "Don't," she said. "Please, just don't." She looked at the assembled wolves, at Cassius, at the broken form of Demon. The prophecy talks about unity, about bringing the supernatural world together. But all I see is betrayal, violence, and pain. Maybe the prophecy should fail. Maybe chaos is what we all deserve. She fled the hall, her footsteps echoing off the ice walls. Behind her, she felt Ravek's anguish through the bond, his desperate need to follow her battling with his responsibility to deal with his traitorous brother. She ran through the fortress, past confused guards, until she burst out onto the highest tower. The northern territory stretched before her, beautiful and cold, just like everything else in her life now. The 3 moons were visible in the twilight sky, growing closer to alignment with each passing night. 53 days remained. 53 days to decide whether to save a world that had taken everything from her or let it burn. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of snow and pine, carrying Ravek's scent. Even now, even after everything, her wolf cried out for its mate. But how could she accept him? How could she accept any of this? She was Lysandra Nightwhisper, last of her line, carrier of prophecy, unwilling mate to the Alpha King whose brother had murdered her family. The bitter irony of it made her laugh, a sound that was more sob than anything else. She'd hidden for 7 years only to be dragged back into a game where everyone wanted to use her power and no one cared about her pain. 3 days passed in tense silence. Lysandra had isolated herself in the tower room Ravek had given her, refusing to see anyone except Sierra, who brought her meals. Through the bond, she felt Ravek's constant presence, his pain at her rejection mixing with his own grief over his brother's betrayal. Demon had been exiled, cast out with the Coven's curse, ensuring he could never return to his wolf form. The pack was in upheaval, trust shattered, and all the while, the 3 moons drew closer to alignment. On the 3rd night, Lysandra stood at her window, studying her grandfather's grimoire that Cassius had left. The ritual was complex, requiring not just her power, but the willing participation of representatives from each supernatural faction. It was meant to be a joining, a moment where all groups set aside their differences to prevent catastrophe. But how could that happen when everyone was at each other's throats? A commotion in the courtyard below drew her attention. Lights, many of them, vehicles arriving in force. Her blood chilled as she recognized the banners. The Southern Alliance had come to Iron Peak, but they weren't alone. Eastern Coven mages, Western Waste warriors, even representatives from the smaller factions. They'd all come, and from the aggressive posturing, they hadn't come to talk. She was down the stairs and into the courtyard before she'd consciously decided to move. Ravek was already there, his inner circle arranged defensively. Across from him stood Victor Bloodmoon, the Southern Alliance's alpha, along with Morgana, High Witch of the Eastern Covens, and others she recognized from old texts and whispered stories. "We've come for the Night Whisper," Victor announced, his scarred face twisted in a mockery of a smile. "The Northern Pack has proven they can't protect her." Their own inner circle was corrupted. She belongs with those who can properly utilize her power. "She belongs with no one," Ravek growled. "She's under my protection." "Your protection?" Morgana laughed, her dark robes billowing in the wind. "Your brother orchestrated her family's murder. What protection can you offer against that kind of betrayal?" "The same brother who was working with your covens," Ivana pointed out, stepping forward with weapons drawn. "A rogue agent," Morgana said dismissively, "acting without authority. Unlike the Northern Pack, we've already cleaned house. Cassius has been disciplined for his unauthorized actions. Lysandra felt sick. They were talking about her like property, like a weapon to be claimed. The grimoire in her hands seemed to pulse with power, responding to her emotional turmoil. Around her, she could feel the supernatural energy building. Too many powerful beings in one place, too much tension. If fighting broke out here, Iron Peak would be destroyed. "Enough!" she said, stepping into the center of the confrontation. Her voice carried a power she hadn't used since childhood, the authority of the Night Whisper line. Everyone turned to her. "You want to know who I choose? Who gets to utilize my power?" She laughed bitterly. "None of you. You're all so busy fighting over the prophecy that you've forgotten what it actually says." She opened the grimoire, reading aloud in the ancient tongue. The words seemed to resonate in the air, making reality itself shiver. "When 3 moons align and chaos threatens all, the moon-blessed child shall stand at the crossroads. Unity through acceptance or destruction through division. The choice lies not in power, but in purpose." "Unity through acceptance," she continued, translating. "That means all factions working together, not fighting over who controls me. But look at you, ready to tear each other apart right here. You're literally creating the chaos the prophecy warns against." "Then tell us, Night Whisper," Victor said, his voice mocking. "How do we achieve this unity? Your family tried for generations and failed." "They failed because they tried to force it," Lysandra said. "They used their power as a threat, just like you're all doing now. But the prophecy requires something different." She looked at each faction leader in turn. "It requires sacrifice, each of you giving up something precious for the greater good." "Pretty words," Morgana said, "but the moons align in 50 days. We don't have time for philosophical debates." That's when they all felt it, a wrongness in the air, like reality itself was stretched too thin. In the sky above, the 3 moons pulsed with unnatural light. Cracks appeared in the air itself, glimpses of the mortal world visible through the tears. Humans walking on streets, completely unaware of the supernatural drama playing out parallel to their reality. "It's starting early!" Thane gasped. "The build-up to the alignment. The veil is already weakening." Through one of the tears, Lysandra saw her bookshop in Saltmere. It was being rebuilt, humans going about their lives, oblivious to the danger approaching. If the veil shattered completely, those innocent people would be thrown into a world of monsters they couldn't comprehend. The death toll would be catastrophic. "You want to fight over me?" Lysandra said, her power flaring. "Fine. But while you do, both worlds move closer to destruction." She raised the grimoire. "The ritual requires representatives from each faction, willingly participating, channeling their power through me during the alignment. If even one faction refuses or acts in bad faith, it fails. So decide. Work together or watch everything burn." Before anyone could respond, another wrongness rippled through the air. But this was different, targeted, deliberate. From the shadows emerged figures Lysandra had hoped never to see again. Silverfang mercenaries, the same group that had participated in her family's massacre. But now they served a new master, one who stepped forward with familiar features. "Hello, brother," Demon said to Ravek, his human form somehow looking more dangerous than his wolf ever had. "Did you think exile would stop me?" "The Coven's curse took my wolf, but it didn't take my knowledge. And I know something none of you do." He smiled, and it was pure malice. "The prophecy isn't about unity or destruction. It's about evolution. The merging of worlds isn't a catastrophe to be prevented. It's the next step in supernatural evolution. And I'm going to make sure it happens." Chaos erupted in the courtyard. Demon's mercenaries attacked from all sides, armed with weapons designed to harm each specific supernatural type. Silver for wolves, iron for fae, blessed wood for vampires. But worse than the physical assault was what Demon himself was doing. He held a corrupted version of the grimoire, pages that had been torn out and hidden, containing not the unity ritual, but its opposite, a ceremony to shatter the veil completely. "The missing pages!" Lysandra breathed in horror. "He had them all along!" Demon began chanting in the ancient tongue, and the tears in reality widened. Through them, humans started noticing the disturbance. A child in Saltmere pointed at the sky, screaming as she saw a massive wolf fighting through a dimensional tear. The masquerade that had protected both worlds for millennia was crumbling. "Stop him!" Victor and Morgana shouted simultaneously, their forces turning from each other to face the common threat. But Demon had positioned himself cleverly, surrounded by a barrier powered by the corrupted ritual. Traditional attacks couldn't reach him. "Only Night Whisper power can break through," Thane said urgently. "The barrier is keyed to that specific magical signature." Lysandra started forward, but Ravek caught her arm. Through the bond, she felt his desperate fear for her safety. "It's a trap. He wants you to come to him. Your power will complete his ritual." "Then what do we do?" she demanded. Around them, the battle raged. Supernatural beings who'd been ready to fight each other moments ago now stood side by side against the mercenaries. But they were losing ground, and with each passing second, the veil weakened further. "We need the unity ritual," Sarah said, dodging a silver blade. "It's the only thing strong enough to counter what he's doing." "It requires willing participation from all factions," Lysandra said. "Look around. We're in the middle of a battle." "Then we make it work," Ravek said. He raised his voice, alpha power commanding attention even in chaos. "All faction leaders to me! Now!" Impossibly, they came. Victor, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Morgana, her robes torn and power dimmed. Leaders of smaller factions, all battered but standing. They formed a circle in the midst of battle, their forces creating a protective barrier around them. "The ritual," Ravek said simply. "We do it now, or we lose everything." "You expect us to channel our power through her?" Victor spat, pointing at Lysandra. "When this could still be a Northern Pact trap?" "I expect you to choose," Ravek said. "Trust or destruction. There's no middle ground anymore." Lysandra opened the true grimoire, her hand shaking. "The ritual requires sacrifice from each faction. Something precious, freely given, and—" She paused, reading further. "A binding between the catalyst, me, and a representative of unity. A mate bond would work, but only if fully accepted by both parties." She looked at Ravek, understanding flooding through her. The prophecy had always been about choice, about acceptance. She'd been rejecting the mate bond because of the pain associated with it, but that rejection was keeping her from her full power. To save both worlds, she had to accept not just her role, but her connection to Ravek, despite everything his family had cost her. "I can't," she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew she had to. Through the bond, she felt Ravek's understanding, his willingness to accept her rejection, if that's what she chose, even if it meant the failure of everything. "Then we're dead," Victor said bluntly. "Look!" Demon's ritual was accelerating. The sky was fracturing like broken glass, pieces of the mortal world falling into the supernatural realm, and vice versa. A city bus suddenly appeared in the middle of the northern wilderness, its passengers screaming as they saw impossible creatures. Dragons that had been hidden for centuries were suddenly visible in human skies. "Choose, Lysandra," Morgana said, and for once her voice held no mockery. "Choose for all of us." Lysandra looked at each faction leader, at the battle raging around them, at the two worlds colliding. Then she looked at Ravek, really looked at him. She saw not his brother's crimes, but his own honor, not the pain of the past, but the possibility of a future. The mate bond pulsed between them, patient and powerful, waiting for her decision. "I need all of you to swear," she said. "Swear that if I do this, if I accept what I've been fighting, you'll honor the unity. No more wars over territory. No more hunting isolated bloodlines. The supernatural world united, as the prophecy intended." One by one, they swore. Victor cut his palm, offering his blood. Morgana pulled off a ring of power she'd worn for centuries. Each faction leader gave something irreplaceable, something that represented their power and position. The sacrifices floated around Lysandra, waiting for her to complete the circuit. She turned to Ravek. "I accept you," she said, and the words seemed to echo across dimensions. "Despite the pain, despite the past, I accept our bond. I accept you as my mate, my equal, my partner in this." The moment the words left her lips, power exploded through her. Not just her own, but Ravek's, amplified by their completed bond. The sacrifices from the faction leaders swirled into the mixture, creating something new, something impossible. True unity of supernatural power. But demons saw it happening and laughed. "Too late, cousin. The veil is already too damaged. Even united, you can't—" He never finished the sentence. Ravek moved faster than lightning, using the power boost from the completed mate bond. He grabbed his brother, and instead of trying to break through the barrier, he did something else entirely. He began pushing his own life force into Lysandra through their bond, giving her not just his power, but his very essence. "No!" Lysandra screamed, understanding what he was doing. He was sacrificing himself to give her enough power to overcome Demon's corrupted ritual. It was the ultimate sacrifice, an alpha giving everything for his mate and his people. "Ravek, stop!" Lysandra screamed, feeling his life force flooding into her through their bond. But he held on, his storm-gray eyes locked on hers with absolute certainty and love. "Trust me," he gasped, his body beginning to fade as he poured everything into her. "The prophecy, unity through acceptance, It's not just about the factions. It's about us. Light and dark, past and future, sacrifice and rebirth. Lysandra finished, suddenly understanding. The prophecy hadn't been about choosing between unity or destruction. It had been about transformation, destroying the old to create something new. She stopped fighting against the power Ravek was giving her, and instead opened herself completely to it. But more than that, she began giving back, creating a circuit between them. Her night whisper power, silver and ancient, merged with his alpha strength, gold and primal. The other faction leaders, seeing what was happening, didn't just offer their sacrifices. They joined the circuit, each adding their unique power to the growing maelstrom. Demon's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening. No, that's not possible. The ritual? Your ritual was corrupted, Lysandra said, her voice now carrying the harmonized power of every supernatural faction. Based on incomplete knowledge and twisted by hate, the true prophecy was never about maintaining the veil or destroying it. It was about evolving past the need for it entirely. She began to speak in the ancient tongue, but these weren't words from any grimoire. They came from deep within, from the collective unconscious of all supernatural beings, from the very fabric of magic itself. As she spoke, the tears in reality didn't heal. They stabilized, becoming permanent doorways between worlds. But something else happened too. The humans who witnessed the supernatural beings didn't run in terror as expected. The magic flowing through the portals touched them, awakening something dormant in their DNA. Children who saw dragons suddenly understood they'd always been able to speak to animals. Adults who glimpsed werewolves realized their own strength had always been more than human. The two worlds weren't colliding. They were reuniting after millennia of artificial separation. This is what my mother saw, Lysandra gasped, tears streaming down her face. Not unity through force or treaty, but through understanding. Humans and supernaturals were never meant to be separate. We're all part of the same tapestry. Demon's barrier shattered as his corrupted ritual was overwritten by the true prophecy's fulfillment. He fell to his knees, the mercenaries around him dropping their weapons as the wave of transformation washed over them too. Even he, cursed and exiled, felt the change. His wolf didn't return, but something else awakened, the ability to see and speak truth, a gift and curse for one who'd lived by lies. I see it now, he whispered, looking at his hands in wonder and horror. Every lie, every betrayal, written in light. What have I done? What have I become? Lysandra wanted to hate him, but the unity flowing through her made even that impossible. You became what fear and jealousy made you, she said, but that's not all you have to be. The transformation was spreading beyond Iron Peak, beyond the Northern Territory, across the entire world. The veil didn't fall. It dissolved, like mist before the sun. Humans and supernaturals stood face to face, not as enemies, but as long-lost relatives finally reunited. There was confusion, yes, and fear. But there was also wonder, recognition, and hope. Ravek solidified beside her, the circuit of power having not drained him, but transformed him. He was still the Alpha King, but now he was something more, a bridge between worlds, marked by silver streaks in his dark hair that matched Lysandra's eyes. Their mate bond had evolved too, becoming not just a connection between two wolves, but a template for how all beings could connect across differences. "The 3 moons?" Victor said, pointing to the sky. The celestial bodies were aligning, but instead of bringing catastrophe, they were celebrating. Their combined light bathed both worlds, now one world, in silver radiance. "They're singing!" He was right. The alignment created a harmony that everyone could hear, a song that spoke of endings and beginnings, of separation and reunion, of fear transformed into understanding. It was the song Lysandra's family had died believing in, finally coming true. "What happens now?" Morgana asked, looking at a human child who was staring at her with fascination rather than fear. "The old rules, the old ways, they're all obsolete." "We make new ones?" Lysandra said, her hand finding Ravek's. Their joined hands glowed with mingled silver and gold light. "Together, all of us, human and supernatural, working to build something better than either world alone could create." Cassius approached, having survived the battle. "The Eastern covens will need guidance. The human governments will need explanation. This is going to be chaos for a while." "Creative chaos," Ravek corrected. "The kind that brings growth, not destruction." He looked at his brother, still kneeling on the ground. "Even those who fought against it will have a place in what comes next, if they choose it." Demon looked up, his eyes now showing every truth he'd tried to hide. "I see the family's eye destroyed. They're standing behind you, Lysandra, not as ghosts, but as echoes of possibility. They forgive me. How can they forgive me?" "Because forgiveness is the only way forward," Lysandra said. And in that moment, she felt her parents' presence, her siblings, all the night whispers who'd come before. They weren't gone. They were part of the tapestry now, woven into the magic that would guide both worlds into their shared future. The prophecy is fulfilled, but our work is just beginning. 6 months had passed since the worlds merged. The forgotten page had been rebuilt, but it was no longer just a bookshop. It had become a meeting place between realities, where humans came to learn about their supernatural neighbors, and where supernatural beings discovered human literature and culture. The shop existed simultaneously in Saltmere and in the Northern Territory, a permanent bridge between what had once been separate worlds. Lysandra stood behind the counter, cataloging new arrivals, a mixture of human bestsellers and ancient supernatural texts that were finally safe to share. Her silver eyes caught the light as she worked, and the mate mark on her neck where Ravek had claimed her properly after the prophecy's fulfillment shimmered with contentment. "Mrs. Chen just brought more pastries," Ravek said, entering from the back room. He'd adapted remarkably well to splitting his time between running the Northern Territory and helping with the bookshop. "She says the dragon who opened a tea shop next door is her new best customer." The world's changed so much, Lysandra mused, accepting the kiss he dropped on her head as he passed. "Sometimes I can't believe it's real." "Believe it," said a familiar voice from the doorway. Tommy Morrison, her former delivery boy, walked in with a stack of books. "Though I still can't believe you were a werewolf this whole time." "That's so cool! Can you teach me how to shift? My grandmother says we might have Selkie blood way back." "Tommy, we've been over this," Lysandra began, but she was smiling. The brass bell chimed again, and Victor Bloodmoon entered, looking somewhat uncomfortable. Relations between the packs were still being negotiated, but progress was being made. "The council meeting is tomorrow," he said gruffly. "The human ambassadors have questions about territory boundaries." "We'll be there," Ravik confirmed. The Supernatural Human Council had been Lysandra's idea, a governing body with equal representation from both sides. It was messy and complicated, but it was working. As the day went on, the shop filled with its usual eclectic mix. A human professor researching werewolf pack dynamics for her sociology class, young supernatural beings browsing human fiction, a mixed couple, human and fae, looking for books about raising hybrid children. Each interaction was a small miracle, a tiny fulfillment of the prophecy's promise. That night, after closing, Lysandra and Ravik stood on the shop's roof, looking at the 3 moons that now permanently graced the sky, a reminder of the transformation that had changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Ravik asked, pulling her close. "Your quiet, hidden life? How can I regret something that led to this?" She replied, gesturing to the integrated world below. Saltmere now had a supernatural district. The Northern Territory had human settlements. Children grew up knowing that magic was real and that differences were to be celebrated, not feared. "Besides," she added, turning in his arms to face him, "I was never meant for hiding. I was meant for this. For you, for the prophecy, for bringing worlds together. My family knew it, even if I didn't want to accept it for the longest time." "The last night whisper?" Ravik murmured, nuzzling her neck where his mark lay. "Not the last," she corrected, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. Through their bond, she let him feel what she'd discovered that morning. New life growing within her, the first of a new generation that would never know a world divided by veils and fear. His eyes widened with joy and wonder. "A child born of both worlds, raised in unity," he said. "The prophecy continues." "No," Lysandra said firmly. "The prophecy is complete. What comes next is just life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. No more prophecies, no more chosen ones. Just people, all kinds of people, learning to live together." They stood there, the Alpha King and the Night Whisper, mates and partners, watching their transformed world settle into its new rhythm. Somewhere in the shop below, the ancient grimoire rested on a shelf, its pages finally at peace. The story it had told was finished, but countless new stories were just beginning. In the distance, a wolf howled, not in loneliness or warning, but in celebration. It was answered by another, then another, until the night filled with a chorus of voices. Human and supernatural, predator and prey, magical and mundane, all united in a song that proclaimed the simple, powerful truth. They were one world now, one people with infinite variety, and the future was bright with possibility. The brass bell of the forgotten page chimed softly in the wind, a gentle reminder that every ending was also a beginning, and that sometimes the greatest magic of all was simply choosing to see the light in the darkness and having the courage to let it shine. She had lived among mortals in silence for 7 years until the Alpha King whispered her real name. But in the end, it wasn't her name that mattered. It was the choice she made to speak her truth, accept her destiny, and transform 2 worlds with the power of unity and love.